Hello everybody, I'm Phil from Indiana University, and I'm a little bit mad at Dwight because he didn't include my clickbait title in the program. So I'll be talking about 4 reasons why social networks make us vulnerable to misinformation, and this is meant to be a very quick overview of the research that we do in my lab. So this plot shows a statistical distribution of the virality measured in one way. You can measure it in multiple different ways, like how many people are exposed to articles or how many people share articles and so on. This in particular focusing on various misinformation sources and also comparing that with fact-checking articles. And what this shows you is that there is a significant, non-negligible chance that information content from these sources, low credibility sources, go viral, so that they are seen and shared tens of thousands of times or hundreds of thousands of times on platforms like Twitter, and which is this data is from, and we've observed the same pattern on Facebook. So what does this mean? So if you look at the tail of the distribution, that's where we find examples of viral pieces of misinformation. This is an example that I'm sure many of you have seen. It spread virally around the elections about spirit cooking. And what we look is at the network of diffusion of this misinformation. So that's what you see there in the picture. That's a diffusion network where the nodes are Twitter accounts. The links between these nodes represent that particular article being shared through retweeting, quoting, mentioning, or replying. And so you build these networks, and we study the structure of these networks and what it tells us about how information spreads. So what you can observe, for example, is that some nodes are very large, and those are the influential nodes that are retweeted many times in the context of, in this case, this particular piece of fake news. You also see that nodes are colored, and that's to show the role played by bots. So red nodes are the ones that are likely bots, and you can see several of them, especially on the periphery, sort of injecting this particular piece of misinformation. So I'll come back later to the role of bots, but that's one of the things that we want to study. I promised 4 reasons, 4 factors, so here it is. Number 4, competition for attention. So we build models. We do both. We study data, and we also build models to interpret this data. And in these models, we try to reproduce in the computer, simulate systems that have some salient features of social media. So here you have nodes that post stuff, and then they can reshare some of the things that is posted by their friends. In one of them, we assume that the things that they share, think of them as articles, memes, whatever, they have a certain quality. You could think of it as trustworthiness, for example, but anything that would make a person prefer to share something of high quality over sharing something of low quality. That's what that equation says. The probability that you share something is proportional to its quality. Now, if you let this model run, what do you find? You expect that higher quality stuff will be more popular. So we measure the correlation between popularity and quality. And what we find in this model is that that correlation depends on some parameters, some factors in the model. So what that density plot shows you is that when attention is low, individual attention is low in the sense that people look at fewer things before they decide what to share, and or when information load is high in that people generate a lot of stuff so that you can only see a small portion of what is posted. In both of those conditions, the correlation between popularity and quality goes way down. So the network at the top right represents this scenario. The size of the nodes represent the quality. So you see a lot of low quality stuff that is being spread. So that shows that limited attention, the competition for limited attention of people in the presence of information overload is one of the factors that matters. Another one is algorithmic bias. So we study this problem from different perspectives. I will just show you one result. This is an analysis that we do based on traffic data, very, very large volumes of traffic data. And we look at which sources people are exposed to coming from different platforms, okay? So which things you click on when you're on Facebook versus what things you click on when you're on Google, and so on. And we measure different kinds of biases. One is heterogeneity biases, homogeneity bias. That's the tendency of a platform to concentrate your attention towards a small subset of all the sources that are there. Another one is popularity bias, which is a focus towards the most popular sources. And all of the platforms that we study, all the social platforms, the search engines, email, social media, Google News, and so on, they all have both of these kinds of biases. And those are even stronger if we focus on news sources. Okay, number 2, social bias. We and others have shown very clearly that, especially in topics like politics, the structure of our communication networks online is very polarized. So this is a picture from one of our papers. It was in Science several years ago, back in 2010. We found that conservatives only retweet other conservatives, and progressives only retweet other progressives. And we kind of know this. We call it filter bubbles. We call it echo chambers, and so on. But one of the questions that we're exploring right now is, what is the role of social networks in fostering the emergence of this segregation? Not just in the fact that once it's there, we can abuse it and exploit it, for example, by targeting messages. So we built a model to explore this question. The model is very simple. Here's a simulation of one of these. The colors represents a person's opinion on a spectrum from liberal to conservative. At the beginning, it's all mixed. You've got people across the spectrum. And initially, these people are connected in a completely random network. And what happens in this model, what we're simulating, is that, first of all, people can be influenced by messages from their friends that reflects an opinion that is similar to their own. So they can change their opinion a little bit, but just a little bit based on similar opinions to their own. And the second one is that if you see something that is very different, you really don't like, different from your opinion, you can unfollow that person or unfriend that person. That's represented by the dashed lines there. Those are connections that are cut. Like if your cousin posts something really offensive, you say, okay, forget it. You unfriend them, and instead, in this model, you friend somebody else completely at random. Okay? So those are the new solid edges that you see. So you can run this many, many times. The outcome is always the same, the one that you show in this animation. If you wait long enough, not only does the network become segregated, but also each of those two echo chambers become more homogeneous. So there's polarization around an idea. Initially, you had a lot of colors. At the end, you have two groups, that one is just in one color and the other one is the other color. So eventually, you're only exposed to information that obviously mirrors your own opinions. And if you wait long enough, it's a little bit depressing. That one last link finally goes away. So what this shows is that it's inevitable that just by very simple rules that all social media use, it's inevitable that you end up with some polarization. And the number one reason that we, at least the one that we study a lot in our lab, is bots. Because bots can exploit all of these other vulnerabilities that we've seen, the social, the cognitive biases, and the algorithmic biases. So we developed a bunch of tools. We demoed a couple of them yesterday for those who were there. One is Botometer, which is a tool. Anybody can use it to assess whether an account is a bot or automated. It's very popular. We field 500,000 queries per day. And you're welcome to use it. There's an API, and et cetera, et cetera. And another tool is Hoaxy. Hoaxy is also a freely available tool. It's also open source. And it's a way to monitor and visualize the diffusion networks for news. We focus in particular on news from low credibility sources and from fact-checking sources, because we want to see how these compete. So here, for example, this is a network for one well-known, infamous piece of fake news. It was an article in InfoWars about the fact that 3 million illegal aliens voted for Clinton. And networks like this can tell us some interesting things. For example, you see the big nodes. You see who are the influential nodes. You see segregation between the communities. You see that the people who share the misinformation, which is the top part, the gray part of the network, really are not exposed to the fact-checking, which is the lower part, the yellow part. Those are the debunking articles from Snopes and PolitiFact. And you also see some abuse. So in the middle, it's very hard for you to see, but there is one pink node, which is a bot, that in a short sequence of time mentioned Donald Trump 19 times with a link to that particular article. And shortly thereafter, we know that Donald Trump said that he read an article about this and formed the infamous commission. So you can use this tool to study this. And in the very little time that I have left, let me tell you some of the things that we learned when we study the data that we collect from Hoaxy. So this is the big network of sharing of all the misinformation that we track. 400,000 articles, claims from low credibility sources, and those are in purple, and then the orange is a smaller number of articles, 15,000 from fact-checking sources. So as you move closer to the core of the misinformation network, you see that basically there's almost no sharing of fact-checking, with the exception of a couple things that you see there, links from PolitiFact. Actually, those are people who are attacking those sources and saying that they're biased and they shouldn't be believed. Or that they post a piece of fake news and then they have a link to Snopes or PolitiFact that actually says the opposite. But people, they count on the fact that people don't click on the link. And so they think that Snopes is actually supporting the piece of misinformation that they're sharing. And another thing that we see as we move close to the core is that the average bot score of the accounts goes up. So in the core, there's a lot of bots. So let me close with three quick findings that we find in this network. Number one is that bots are targeting influential accounts. So the more your bot score is high, the more you're likely to mention really influential people. These are politicians or journalists. So those of you here are journalists. You are being targeted. The second one is that in the first few instances, in the first few 10 seconds after a fake news article is posted, we see a big spike in posting from bots. So bots are acting very, very early on to amplify, inject the message. And the third one is that bots can repeat the same, links, posting of the same link many, many times. In this plot, you show the distribution. What this shows is that the same account can post the same misinformation article thousands of times. Okay? So repeating, keeping injecting. And those are things that are very easy to do. All right, and one worrisome thing is that we find, what this plot shows you, is that most of the retweeting is done by the humans. Okay? So that's what the projection chart at the top says. If you're retweeting, you're probably a human. You have a low bot score. But who are the humans retweeting? Okay, and that's the chart on the left. And it shows that humans are retweeting other humans, but they're also retweeting a lot of bots. So this means that there is impact, okay? Humans are resharing low credibility content from bots. Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you very much. I'm happy to tell you more about our research. And those are the great students in our lab who are doing all the work. Thanks.